Welcome to the More Than Fitness podcast.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Minisode number 54 on the More Than Fitness podcast. Today's topic's a good one, guys. We've got a very controversial topic that a lot of people, for whatever reason, really care about. And that topic is the honest truth about sugar and your fitness goals. Like I said, a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions on sugar for some reason. The fact that people have I think the only people that I can see that really have a case for being really ideological about the food that they eat would be like vegans and vegetarians. And, I'm not going to get into the nuance with that or give my thoughts on that. But I think it's just very odd when people have their entire identity wrapped up in the food that they consume on a regular basis, or the lack of food that they consume on a regular basis. But anyway, with this topic, sugar, it's an interesting one because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around sugar, especially for so I want to put this minisode in the context of you guys, the people who are listening, which are most likely healthy individuals who are exercising regularly. I'm not talking about anybody with health conditions or people who are regularly sedentary and they hardly ever work out. I'm talking about you guys who are most of you are probably in better shape than the average individual. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. I think the best way to go about talking about this is to give you two practical scenarios whenever people talk about sugar being bad, right? And so I think that we would start with the scenario of what I just said, somebody being sedentary for the majority of the day, right? There's a big difference between consuming some sugar at the end of the night whenever you've basically done nothing all day long and you're just slamming Fruit Loops or Lucky Charms on your couch, or if you're a athlete who just finished up a race or just finished up a very hardcore gym session and then you're drinking something like a Gatorade, right? Obviously, there's two completely different situations there, and we can dive into each one of those. But in the case of the athlete, there is no reason that the sugar in that Gatorade, or if they consumed any other type of sugar or something, or a simple carbohydrate, as people like to use the term, there's nothing wrong with that. And actually, it's on par with what that athlete needs to do, especially if that athlete would have another race later in the day, or if they would have an AM workout session and a PM workout session. I talked about this in my nutrient timing minisode, a couple minisodes ago, actually. But in this case, it absolutely makes sense to down some sugar after you hit their workout, because that's going to be digested very quickly. It's going to get into their bloodstream really quickly. It's going to hopefully be stored as liver glycogen and then also stored as muscle glycogen, right? That they can use for their next race. There's no reason, like, you hear the argument between, like, if you would just have raw sugar, say in a Gatorade or something, which is actually mostly dextrose, which is different than table sugar, which I think should also be considered, because table sugar is a combination of fructose and glucose, right? It's not just glucose or just fructose, right? So whenever people say sugar, they typically don't even know what they mean in the first place. There's a bunch of different variations of what quote unquote sugar even means, right? But back to the situation. In this case, if the guy would have, say, a more traditionally praised carb source like oatmeal or something, a complex carbohydrate directly after their race, and then they had to race, say, a couple hours later, well, he would actually not be optimizing for his task at hand. Like, it would actually be worse for his performance to eat that oatmeal after his workout as it would be, say, Fruit Loops or like Fruity Pebbles or a Gatorade, for example. A Gatorade would obviously be the best one because it can be very quickly digested and it can get into their muscles as quickly as possible so that by the time their next race comes, it can be digested and ready for use, right? If they had the oatmeal, the complex carbohydrate, it's going to be a little bit more slower digesting simply because it is a complex carbohydrate. And then also there's some fiber in there as well, but it wouldn't be the smart choice. But then you take it to the other situation and we have the couch potato who's basically been sedentary all day. They have less than 1,000 steps and they've basically done nothing all day. And then at the end of the night, they have a big thing of Fruit Loops or Lucky Charms or something like that. Like in that case, this is definitely not an optimal food choice, right? And in no way can you say like, oh, that's the healthy choice that guy should be consuming. And it's not because necessarily the sugar is inherently fattening or anything like that. I think what the issue is that the problem is not necessarily sugar itself. It is what is devoid in sugar, which is things like micronutrients, fiber, and also it can be very easy to overconsume. So it increases the palatability of foods. So other things, so sugar, salt, fat, all of these things increase the palatability of foods. And that's why things like, Doritos or Oreos, you can just eat so many of them because they're super easy to eat. And that's because they have these ingredients in them. So whenever it comes to these two different situations, the couch potato at the end of the night, and even with the athlete, I don't think it's a smart idea for them to drink Gatorade the entire day or anything like that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that just because it's sugar, just because its molecular structure is glucose and fructose, does not mean it is inherently bad. And it also doesn't mean, so it's not inherently bad for your health. It's not like as soon as you eat sugar, you have ill health effects with your body. But also in many studies, whenever it comes to fat loss, when calories, protein, and fiber for the day are matched between two different groups, the fat loss is basically the exact same. So there is no difference whenever the calories for the day, so the total food that they're eating, the amount of protein they're eating, and the fiber, which you cannot have a quote unquote, you cannot have a nutritious diet without making sure that you at least have a decent amount of fiber each day, because you've got to think fiber comes from our vegetables, fruits, whole grains, are foods that have typically the highest amount of nutrition, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, all these fun things that make it healthy, right? Sugar is devoid of this. But as far as fat loss goes, it's pretty. The debate is mostly closed, at least from the studies that I've seen, the research I've looked at. Whenever you have all things considered with healthy individuals, fat loss is going to be no different when calories, protein, and fiber are matched. So this is the case that I want to make. Yes, sugar has its pros and cons. So some of the cons with sugar, one thing is going to be dental cavities, right? So the more sugar you consume, it's pretty clear that it's not good for your teeth. So if you're worried about your teeth, consuming a lot of sugar is definitely not going to be good. And then you also have natural sugar in things like fruit, right? And then fruit, you also have the acids and things in that are a double whammy and not going to be the best for your health. Of course, if people are downing things like Coca-Cola or whatever, you're going to have the carbonation of the drink, and then also the sugar is also going to be bad for your dental hygiene. But again, with the cons, it's going to be lacking fiber, the lacking micronutrients, and it's easily consumed. It's easy to consume a lot of calories whenever the food is high in sugar. So that is something. So if you're on a diet, it's probably not a good idea to have a very high sugar diet, because there's other choices that you could make that would be better in terms of satiation, And then also just making sure that you hit the main thing. So your calories, your macronutrients for the day. If you're eating Pop-Tarts for every meal, it's going to be very difficult to hit your fiber goal, to hit your protein goal, to make sure that you end the day without, starving yourself because you're just consuming shitty foods to try and fit calories and, or to try and fit these certain foods into your diet. Which is another thing that I think needs to be mentioned with this topic is that you shouldn't. What I'm saying with this, just because I think that sugar is not the devil and that it's not inherently bad or fattening or anything like that, doesn't mean you should try and fit as much sugar in your diet as possible. You shouldn't try and get away with fitting as much sugar in your diet as possible. It's just there's going to be other options that would be better for your health, better for your fat loss, better for your muscle gain. Excuse me. But as far as on a regular basis, sugar is not going to be it's not going to be the worst thing for your health, but it's also not going to be the best thing for your health, right? But it has its time and place. I don't think you should demonize it or be super afraid of it. I think all in all, if you're looking for some practical recommendations on how much sugar should you actually consume in a day, I would say the upper limit would be about 50 grams of added sugars. So I'm not saying sugars from things like fruit or milk or dairy products or things like that, things that are naturally occurring sugars. I'm talking about added sugars in candies or cereals. And now if you look on the back of nutrition labels, you can see the little row that has added sugars. And so making sure that you limit it to about 50 grams or less for most people is going to be a good estimate. And again, don't try to just, okay, I'm going to make sure I don't go higher than that 50 gram mark, but I'm going to try and hit 50 grams every single day. That's not conducive to a healthy diet, or it's not going to make your goals any easier. However, if you need to have that Snicker bar or that dessert after dinner or something like that, and it's going to allow you to stay on track with your fitness goals the majority of the time, it's going to allow you to eat a nutritious diet the majority of the time, then it's like, of course you can have it. Moderation, balance, all that fun stuff. But yeah, to me, as a registered dietitian, I think sugar is not the devil. I don't think it's inherently bad. However, we need to make sure that we understand what it actually is, what it could be used for, things like post-training and things like that. And also to make food a little bit more fun whenever you need it to make sure that you can stay on track with your goals. I think that's perfectly fine. Recognizing it for what it is, trying to be objective and not trying to make it fit my diet ideology beliefs. That is what is most important. So yeah, that's it for sugar. That's a wrap. I hope that helped. And as always, thank you so much for listening and for watching. See ya.